When I told them, they were visibly upset. In fact, I kind of characterized, they were mad at me. How dare you retire was really the sense. And it kind of took me aback because I didn't expect it. I expected the words to come out of their mouth. Oh, that's great, Steve. I know you've worked well on this transition and bringing in the right people. Didn't get that at all. In fact, I had to have a separate conversation with just them. But anyway, it actually all worked out in the end, but it was really surprising. And I think some of it speaks to the fears that clients have when that key person in their world, whether it be their doctor or their dentist or their physiotherapist or their investment advisor leaves. What am I going to do next?
If you're a financial advisor or wealth management leader who knows that some of your most important client conversations happen when life is changing, this show is for you. I'm Kathleen, joined by my co-host Yasmin. Every episode of Advising Humans gives you language, insight, and a clearer picture of what your clients are actually going through, so you can show up prepared for the moments that matter most.
What does a client actually feel when their advisor tells them they're leaving? Not what they say, what they feel. Steve Springstead spent 33 years as a wealth advisor and portfolio manager. He built a team, led his own transition, and now coaches other advisors and firms going through succession. He's seen this from every angle. And in this conversation, he shares what he got right, what he'd do differently, and what clients actually want during an advisor transition. This episode is part of our Advisor Transition series. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Steve, it's so good to have you with us. We really are glad to have this conversation because you bring a perspective that is genuinely rare. You spent 3 decades as a wealth advisor and portfolio manager. And you also spent many years in leadership, coaching, and supporting advisors from the management side. And now in this next chapter, you're working with advisors and firms across the country on growth, change, and succession. And not to be forgotten, future-proofing their practices. So you've seen this world from many angles, and you've lived the client relationship side. You've lived the team and the leadership side, and then you went through your own transition after a long career, which gives you a very personal lens on a topic that lots of firms are talking about right now, but not always getting enough depth or honesty in that conversation. And that's really why we wanted to have you here. On this show, we care a lot about the human side of advice, especially in moments of transition, when what looks straightforward from the inside of the firm can feel more personal and uncertain and emotionally loaded for the client. And boy, I've experienced that. And you seem to bring both the practical wisdom and the lived perspective to talk about in a way that can really help people. So I'd love to start here.
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. When you started, Steve, when you were thinking seriously about your own transition after 33 years, what mattered most to you about getting it right?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it. I always take a lens whenever I'm dealing with anything. And when I was dealing with clients and helping clients over the 3 decades, you make me feel old. Yeah. We actually had not a tagline. I don't really like that word, but we always had a thing where put yourself in your client's shoes, right? Even when they were recording a video for our website, when I was an advisor for my partner, they kept after us and saying, okay, what's the thread here? What are you all about? And that was the thing, that was the central message of the video that was on our website. So when it came to my own retirement, I said, okay, what's important to me? And the lens was, number one, taking care of the clients, because why wouldn't it be? If that was my lens throughout my career, of course, it was going to be my lens when I retired. Second lens was taking care of my team, right? I still can consider them my team. I still call them my team, in fact, when I'm talking to them, but we had an expression called BTE, best team ever. And yeah, I'll even start emails, dear BTE. So it was very important that they stayed together as a team, because I've seen transitions where a new advisor comes in and they break up the team and people go all over the place. And it's very important from the client perspective, especially if they like the team, for that team to stay together. And then finally, doing right by the firm, right? And my firm was extremely loyal to me as I was to them. And I wanted to make sure that it was a great experience for the firm as well. So that was really my lens.
Yeah. Steve, I'm curious, when you shared the news with your clients, was there anything that surprised you about how they responded when they were learning that you were transitioning?
Yeah, there was a few surprises, but which you don't always expect. You always have certain assumptions when you're dealing with clients that they'll act in a certain way. And one of the things that we were very keen on was we were not going to send a form letter, because to me, that's kind of the horror story in any industry. I've heard from clients who say, I got a letter from my doctor. And I actually had one say, I got a letter from the successor to my doctor. It's not even their own doctor, that they were leaving, right? So we did a lot of in-person meetings. We did some video calls, a few phone calls, but most of it was in person. And so, I would say there's a really good example of two clients. So one client, him and his wife, really great relationship, had a great relationship with their two boys and then grandkids, and had them as a client for a long time. We really love each other in terms of our relationship. And so when I told them, they were visibly upset. In fact, I kind of characterized, they were mad at me. How dare you retire was really the sense. And it kind of took me aback, because I didn't expect it. I expected the words to come out of their mouth. Oh, that's great, Steve. I know you've worked well on this transition and bringing in the right people. Didn't get that at all. In fact, I had to have a separate conversation with just them, because the initial conversation was with my successor, who they already knew, but they wanted a sidebar to kind of, I don't know, berate me again or something. I'm not so sure. But anyway, it actually all worked out in the end, but it was really surprising. And then the second one, I actually left this client to near the end of my transition. They were one of the last clients to be told. And their client actually did a review monthly. It was usually a phone call. They were very much into the markets, and there was a lot of, transactional business that would happen, because that's what they like to do. They love to trade. So I really got to know, you talk to somebody 12 times a year over many years, you get to know them really well. And I just felt like maybe they were going to think that all of the knowledge on the stocks was up here and I hadn't translated. And now if I was leaving this new person who they already knew, where was that knowledge going to go? When I told them I was retiring, words out of their mouth were, congratulations, Steve. What a great thing. Retirement is great. Yeah, we're so happy for you. And it was just, wow. I honestly couldn't believe it. And it's why I waited till the end, because I was afraid of the reaction. But really good question, Yasmin, because you can't make assumptions about these meetings, because you don't know what's going on. And I think some of it, especially the first one, speaks to the fears that clients have when that key person in their world, whether it be their doctor or their dentist or their physiotherapist or their investment advisor, leaves. What am I going to do next? So.
Well, Steve, you've actually answered one of the questions I had for you. And thank you so much, because I'm going to tell you the experience that I had was so completely different than what you offered your clients. And because you did it that way, I'm just wondering, from the client's point of view, how did you know what they really wanted, or did you know what they would really want during this change?
I didn't know specifically. Obviously, I'm not them. But again, it goes back to that mantra. Put yourself in your client's shoes. If I were a client sitting on the other side and I had an advisory team and I'd been dealing with them for 20 or 30 years, what would I want from them? And I would say we planned it out a lot in advance. And I think we did a lot of things right. But guess what? We did some things not so right. So, but first thing would be, I would want to be met in person, right? I wouldn't want the form letter. I wouldn't want, hey, we're leaving. And I would also want a longer timeline, as opposed to, hey, I'm leaving next month, right? These are all things I would want as a client. So we tried to bring that as much as possible. But again, we did some things well, but there's other things in retrospect I'd do differently.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and say, Steve, what would you have done differently?
Yeah. So a couple of things, when I started my planning, it was about 10 years ago. I went to my branch manager. I told my team that I was going to retire when I was 59 years, 364 days, and I wasn't going to be sitting in a chair when I was 60. It was a silly thing that I had in my mind. I'd been an advisor since I was 28, so that would have given me 32 years. To me, that was enough. I've got a big curiosity about other things beyond investment management. So I thought, okay, this would be a good time. And then I started the transition in earnest. In other words, actually letting clients know and messaging and, all of that thing about 2.5 to 3 years before.
Wow.
Yeah. However, what I'm finding, and this is through some of the speaking and panelist engagements I've been doing, is that is probably not enough because there are so many things that need to be done well in advance. So if you talk to any business owners, one of the speakers at the session I was at recently, he is the business succession expert for the firm's clients. And so he deals with business owners. And most business owners, you should be starting in earnest 10 years, not just saying I'm going to retire in 10 years, but actually putting the pieces together because there are so many pieces. And so he says advisors should do the same thing. We are business owners just like any other business owner, and we have loyal clients that need to be taken care of in so many different aspects. And there's also, if you think about my transition in 2 or 3 years, some clients got met with and introduced to the new advisor twice or 3 times, maybe 4. There was some near the end where it was like once or twice, sometimes only once. And then they were dealing with the new advisor, right? There are some best practices that I have learned through some of these panel discussions that I've had that make me rethink how I would.
Steve, on the spectrum of 10 years to one meeting right before you transition, and where you've been more closer to the 10-year mark here in your planning, I'm curious, what have you noticed that advisors tend to miss along the way, regardless of the length of the runway?
Yeah. As I say, I've learned a lot from looking at things in retrospect and thinking about how I did it. But again, if we take the client lens, advisors miss that clients want a real relationship with the new advisor. And ideally, they want a real relationship with that new advisor while you are still there, right?
That's totally the point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you probably experienced something different. I'm
Yes.
thinking. I've heard your stories. I kind of know that's true. Having a long runway, we actually used a concept called lifetime advice. So this is something, again, this is one thing I did well in that 10 years before was our team, part of our brand was we were going to give our clients lifetime advice. And we messaged that to our client that my job as an advisor is not just to manage your money, but it's to make sure that beyond me, you have a great advisory team. So I had thought of this years and years before. If I were to do it over today, actually, I would call it lifetime family advice because the focus is, especially clients have gotten older, the focus is not only on them, but their spouse and the next generation. We also did some webinars with the new IA, or really it wasn't really new, but my other partner, so that he had some visibility beyond just the in-person meeting. But what I'm hearing as best practices, and this was brought up in some of the panelist discussions that I've been involved in, is the ideal, and I can see from a client's point of view, this would be perfect. The retiring IA leads the first meeting where succession is discussed, and then the new IA observes, right? So there's some visibility there. Second meeting, the retiring IA leads, and the new IA supports, provides some input as well. Third meeting, the new IA lead. So it's no longer the retiring IA, and the retiring IA supports. And then the fourth meeting with the client, the new IA leads, and the retiring IA just sits back and goes, what am I doing here? Time for me to exit, right? To me, when I heard that, I went, that's ideal. That's ideal because this is just slow transition. And it allows, as I said, that real relationship to be built before the older advisor leaves. So that's one thing. The second thing that, because we're in the investment management business, I knew when I was sitting in front of clients that they had in their head, even though they didn't speak it, these are the unspoken things, is you really did good investment, Steve, but what about the next person that's coming in? How good are they, right? They wouldn't say it, but I kind of knew it. So one of the things we did probably 4 or 5 years before I retired was we started an internal investment committee. And it was myself, my partner, and the person who did all the trading, our associate, Jenny. And we did that, one, because we wanted to be more cohesive. It allowed for some coaching and development on the investment side. But two, what I didn't realize is that messaging was very good in my transition, because when clients would ask the question, or I would bring it up even if they didn't ask the question, we could say, well, there's been this natural transition of investment knowledge from one to the other. And in fact, about a year and a half before I retired, we sort of used titles. I was the chief investment officer, a small little team, but I made my partner, a boss, chief investment officer, about a year and a half. And I said, I'll take the back seat. You take the front seat. I'll still sit there and scrutinize every one of your decisions, and we'll have healthy dialogue, but it allowed internally that transition. So I think a real relationship with the IA, investments being well managed. The other thing that came up with clients, because I would have clients ask me even before I was planning a transition, how many clients do you manage? Because it's funny because I don't always see it, but they see you grow and they see you develop and they go, they're pretty good. They probably got a lot of clients. Where do I fit in all of this, right? So we were asked that question anyway, but then it really became a question when I was about to retire, because I didn't think about it initially, but it was, we had my clients, my partner's clients, but we were bringing in another partner who also had clients, right? So now we had 3 client bases. And then when I exit stage left, there's 2 advisors, right? For 3 client bases. So we actually had to stop in the middle of our transition a little bit and backtrack. And we were actually tasked, and I thought it was a great idea by our leadership, to transition some relationships outside of our client base, right? And that was really, we all get to choose our successor outside of the client base. So advisors within the branch, people we trusted, and people we thought would be a good fit for these clients, right? So we, like some clients, it was hard because we were saying goodbye to certain clients, but the flip side would be that the new team with the 2 advisors taking 3 client bases was going to be overburdened. So I was always wanting to make sure people had an advisor who could take care of them, right? And if it wasn't in our team, it could be in another team. So we did that, and that was hard, but it was something I think that needed to be done. The fourth thing in terms of what clients want is your team to stay together, especially if they like the team. There's a team member on our team, Nadia, who was the absolute glue on our team. When I talked about leaving, almost the first question out of so many clients' mind was, is Nadia staying? To the point where I was like, do they really care if I leave? They really care if Nadia stays. They don't care if I stay. But that was important. And I knew that. And so we did everything in our power to make sure that Nadia was staying, because that was important to the clients. And then the last one is this core philosophy. I think every client is with an advisor long-term because they mesh on their philosophies.
Absolutely.
Right? How fast you respond to inquiries, the quality and type of meetings you have, the way you manage investments, your communication style, how you do things in terms of your processes as a team, right? That was important to me to make sure I translated those core philosophies. And I would say the holy grail for a team, or to give advice to another team going through this, is to actually document all of that, document the philosophies and the processes. And I'm coaching teams right now. I'm coaching 2 teams who are doing exactly that, not only for their practice ongoing, but for the continuity of their practice once they're gone. New advisors, new people coming into the team could just open up the manual and say, this is how we do things. It's like when Warren Buffett retired recently, right? Everybody knew that the team and this gentleman, Greg, I forgot his last name, but he's Canadian. Everybody knew that it was just going to continue. There wasn't going to be, oh, we have a different response time and we have a different way of managing things and we have a different communication style. Those are really the 5 things. But again, it's all from the client lens.
Steve, can I chime in on this real quick? I so appreciate your framework for those 5 different pieces here. And I love that you talked about the advice side, and then you also mentioned the relationship piece, which is what the clients really value. And I'm curious if we could
Sure.
dive a little bit deeper on the relationship side in terms of, from the client's perspective, how do you make this transition feel more personal than it is procedural from a firm's perspective? What is it that they're looking for that could really make them feel really seen and understood as they transition?
Yeah, I think clients see whether you're rushing it, right? Or you're rushing out the door. And I've seen advisors do exactly that. But yeah, exact opposite of what you would want. But so that's really what it comes down to is they use the term knowing your clients, right? And I think in knowing my clients, they cared about the relationship side. They cared about the personnel on our team and actually developed real relationships with other people on the team other than me. So again, it's that personal side. I care about you. I care about the team. I know you're going to be gone eventually, Steve, but what can you do for me to make me feel comfortable, right? To make me feel safe, make me feel that I matter. Those are the things that are beyond the procedural things that we do.
And thinking that you have to start all over with a new advisor, that the information that you've given the previous advisor may not be transferred in a manner that you outlined that you enjoyed. It causes such, you mentioned a little bit earlier about trust, but it does cause panic for the
Yeah.
client because they don't know what's going to be required of them either. How much conversation has to take place before this new person understands what I want in life and what my viewpoints on things. So I really respect that, something that you thought up well in advance and actually developed kind of a playbook
Yeah.
that would be used during those transition periods and the period leading up to it. So that's certainly not something I've experienced.
Yeah. Just one last thing on that point is part of the transfer of that knowledge. I was known around the office to be the guy who makes really detailed notes about,
Hey.
I mean, they call me the process guy or the systems guy, but I knew that making detailed notes was helping me when I was an advisor and looking back at a client and what were the things that we talked about. But I also knew that for advisors coming in, to be able to review those notes and not start over, as like that's the common complaint is, oh God, we're starting over again. I'm going to have to tell my whole story over again. So making those notes helped a lot.
Wow. Well, I can so appreciate your level of detailedness. As Kathleen would know, my notes tend to be really long and involved, but she gets through all of them. But I'm curious, as we wrap up our conversation for this episode, I'm curious, how would you summarize, or what would be the executive summary of the concepts of what we talked about, which is, what do clients really want? What matters during this type of transition, Steve?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to the lessons I've learned through all of this. And one of them is have a long runway because clients want that. They want that real relationship with the new advisor, and doing it in a short time frame just won't work, right? It'll feel rushed and then it'll just take that much longer. Clients want you to keep them in mind. Again, it's putting yourself in the client's shoes. So, what matters to them? How do they like to do things? So they would like that translated. In fact, we had some conversations about, do they just want what they had, or maybe things can be even better, right? I'll just give you one quick example there before I wrap up. But so in our investment management committee meetings, our newest partner, so the second advisor joining the team, we were sitting around and talking about ideas. And he said, Steve, don't you know the firm has this screening tool that allows us to quickly screen stocks and do a better job of screening stocks for clients to invest in? And the rest of us were like, no, we didn't. And he showed it to us and he showed us the reports and I said, you are now in charge of stock screening for the team. But again, it was new ideas coming into the team, right? So I think that's also important to think. It's not just necessarily keeping the status quo, but are there even better things that a new team can do that to the old team maybe stuck in old ideas? I think one of the lessons I learned, I certainly hired my first partner 10 years ago. The second gentleman came in about a year and a half before. And I think for clients, that's too short. Even though we did try and we were trying to recruit for probably 4 or 5 years. That recruiting time takes a while. And sometimes you get down the road with a candidate who you think is going to be ideal, and then they decide to go somewhere else. And so recruiting is a long process. If I had to do it over again for the clients, I would have recruited the second partner sooner, because it really does matter. Again, the longer they're in the seat, the longer that relationship can build before you leave. And that's really it, Yasmin. It's, I think it's, again, clients first and then everything else second is really what it comes down to.
Well, our conversation is always exciting and invigorating and offers so much insight into what you do, Steve, and certainly the reason that we're having this conversation to begin with. And what really stands out that advisor transition and the teaching around that and the leadership that's important to have as an element within that, it's not just operational. It's a relationship issue, which is what you've just outlined. And it's a trust that the clients have. And you want to expand that trust when that transition happens. And when that transition happens, the client should and can, given your outline, have a steadier and a stronger feeling for the firm that they've been with. So those assets are retained for generations. And I really want to thank you so much. I said it before, but our conversations are always rich, deep, with a little bit of humor added. And I love the fact that we've done this podcast, and hopefully our audience will know that there's going to be more upcoming podcasts that we share with you. So thank you so, so much. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on Advising Humans.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, how do we learn more about you and how you can help firms and other advisors as well?
Yeah, as you both know, I've done my own retirement transition. So I'm now doing coaching for advisors. My firm name is Execution Edge Coaching and Consulting. The website is www.executionedge.org. I also post very actively on LinkedIn. It's one of the favorite things I have to do because I get to use my creativity. I get to tell stories and also give some insights with some humor, as you mentioned, into what's going on in the industry, what the trends are in the industry, and what's important to advisors going forward. And also look forward someday to my new book, my first book, What's Next Gen? Fixing the Wealth Gap One Family at a Time. It will happen, believe me.
It will happen. Yeah. I don't doubt that for a second. Yeah. I don't.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This has been incredible, and we're so grateful that we've got a chance to share this with you. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If something landed for you, whether it's language for your own transition planning or just a clearer sense of what your clients are quietly carrying, we're glad it did. Every episode of Advising Humans is built around one idea. The human side of advice is not soft. It is the part that determines whether clients stay, whether they trust the next advisor you introduce them to, and whether the relationship holds through change. Show notes and episode resources are at advisinghumans.com. And if you know an advisor or firm leader navigating a succession or advisor transition right now, send this their way. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.